you for taking time to ponder excellence in teaching in the midst of what are often very busy schedules at this time of year. I'm Janet Carlson. I direct the Center to Support Excellence in Teaching, and one of the things we do is not take excellence for granted. And as a result, 3 years ago, we launched a series of monthly talks during the school year called Pondering Excellence. And we invite speakers of interest to push your thinking. And you might have a hint from G's title that he's going to provoke your thinking and I think discussion today as well, right? So I am very pleased to introduce Dr. G. Reyes. He graduated from another school in California,
Here we go.
but managed somehow to get a good doctoral education. Is currently doing his postdoc at Scale. Let's see if I can get it. Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning, and Equity.
There you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
which also now is combined with understanding language. And it's actually through one of the doc students that works in CSET, Anthony Villa, who knew G and recommended him to be a speaker. And so I was really excited because his work comes with this wonderful mix of what I would consider trenches in academia. He has a long history of many different positions in Oakland Public Schools. And I really don't want to say much more because I think you and your talk speak for yourself. So let's welcome Gene and look forward to pondering excellence.
I also got turned on to the CSAT talks through Jeremiah Sims.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he was
Another
one
school
of our
in
speakers.
California.
Yeah. And gave an excellent talk, by the way.
Yes, well, good thing. Gave the way. What is it? December is almost the new year, right? I gotta just let this out, ground myself in this. Because I'm frustrated again about what's going on. I don't think I'll be teacher of the year. And frankly, I think it's because I haven't been playing this game designed by bureaucratic pimps trying to promote this competitive atmosphere, trying to trick out this beautiful profession as if it was a cutthroat career, trying to sell our souls as if we were teacher whores, hustling prescriptive tricks for one-sided simplified statistics that don't even mean shh. It's not that I'm anti-test. I'm not even anti-content standards. But I am anti-protest. And I protest those who stop everything for the tests, who put everything on those tests, who aren't critical about what's on those tests, who say that we are not highly qualified when our youth do not perform well on those tests. Well, we all know that those tests are not as they appear. And we all know that there are lowered expectations of us. Don't expect us to develop the next Shakespeare. So, hold up. Here, let me shake this spear for them. The one that check marks the ballot box of you, everyday teachers of the year, who are the underappreciated, unseen, disrespected ones who truly want to be here. You walk crowded halls sincere about pushing the limits clear beyond what they thought they could do. So if no one ever told you, then I appreciate you. And now you do. Thanks, everybody. Welcome. I start out that way because time and time again, we as educators are in conditions that demean our professionalism, that demean our motivations, that demean us in a lot of different ways, despite the rhetoric of, oh, you're a teacher, you should be rewarded better here, and so forth. And so I want to provide that recognition to you all as teachers who've come here at 4:15, 4:30, probably came from schools or wherever you're coming from, to be able to engage in some productive conversations. I also want to start it that way to just be able to disrupt the notions of what does it mean to give a talk, what does it mean to talk about some research, and what does it mean to engage in some conversations about the work that we do around some theoretical frameworks and ideas of research and so forth. So I want to just push some thinking by pushing the way in which we started off these things. So with that, I want to push us to think about the things that have been pushing me. And so I want to think about this idea that that research a lot of times is about unquestioned answers as well as unanswered questions. And I want to invoke this poet from the 1930s. His name was Rainier Maria Rilke. And he said this thing here, which really resonates with me for a long time. And I'd like to have you all help me read through this. And if I can get a person to read the orange, someone else to read the blue, someone else to read the yellow, nice and loud, that'll set us off on a good foot. Just jump right in.
Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue.
Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given to you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything.
Live the questions now. Perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live into the answer.
All right, so while I'll be engaging you in some conversation around research questions that I've been exploring at a particular, within a particular context, these questions, that which I'll talk about later on, they've been things that I've been constantly trying to look at in a lot of my work at Stanford as well as my work at Phil's. So we'll explore those today, and really, I don't know if you walk away here with answers, but hopefully you walk away here with more questions. Okay? So what are we going to do today? I want to just frame up the trajectory of what we're going to be focusing on. Basically, I want to talk about what's dangerous. I want to talk about what's whatever. And I want to talk about this new idea here that I'm pushing out. It's called what's woke. Anyone know about what it means to be woke? All right, a couple folks. All right, so we'll dig into this, and hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll understand this a lot more critically and in ways that will relate to your own context. Speaking of context, I want to know about who you are, and what's your context. And so someone who's on the metaphorical block, whether that's the Gramscian in terms of like the block is us coming together to work towards something, or whether it's about like the neighborhood that you're in, the communities that you're from, and so forth. I want to hear from you first. I want to hear, I want to know your name. I want to know where you work, or where you study, and then what's the responsibility that you have to try to do. Okay. We'll start out, and then we'll go circular from there.
I'm Preeta Menon. I'm a postdoc researcher at UL Scale. I'm a career Burji. And responsibilities, still trying to figure that one. And currently I'm working on an assessment project aligned with NGSS, and I'm working on curating a lot of science performance tasks. That's my background in science education. And looking at the intersection of science and language in assessments, and that's been my.
Hi, my name is Annie Crow, and to quote G, I do a lot of different things. They call me a postdoc at UL Scale, and my background is as a secondary language teacher and working with problem-based learning, project-based learning, and adolescent immigrant students. And I'm also a 1.5 generation immigrant myself from Taiwan.
So do you know what UL Scale means?
I do.
Good.
Do you know what it is?
Not everybody does.
He's at UL Scale.
Okay. I'm Helen Quinn. I'm a retired physicist who dedicates her retirement to science education in a variety of ways. I'm also working with Preeta on some of the science assessment work at UL Scale. And with Guadalupe Valdez on curriculum for learning science and language.
Okay. So, welcome. Maybe go down the rest this way, Scott.
I'm Scott McLeod. I'm developing World University and School. So it's like MIT OpenCourseware under a Creative Commons license, 7 languages, 2,300 courses in English. At the graduate and undergraduate level, we'd like to add law and medicine online. We'd like to create major universities in all countries' main languages, a Japan World University and School in Japanese, a Korean World University and School in Korean. We'd also like to have IB high school degrees. We'd like to have teachers in group video, creating transformative learning, teaching to the MIT faculty. That's one side, free degrees under Creative Commons license. On the other side, we'd like to have wiki schools in all 7,097 living languages, so that anyone could openly teach. Add a wiki subject, teach to their YouTube camera channel, and the conversation emerges on Wiki. And we cultivate that conversation a little bit, like Wikipedia's cultivated the conversation. So free degrees, 200 countries' main languages, Creative Commons license, Wiki schools, all 7,000 languages. How to create a flourishing conversation in that space. We'd like to study how people enjoy learning also interlingually. So there's that possibility to focus enjoyment and learning.
I'm Melissa Sheedy. I work here at the Center to Support Excellence in Teaching and the Hollyhock Fellowship Program, and my big responsibility is to support and coach teachers who predominantly work with students who live in challenging contexts or settings, or who really need the support of a teacher to help them grow and learn and get on the trajectory of their life that they want to be.
Hello, I'm Angela Estrella. I also work here for the Center to Support Excellence in Teaching, the Hollyhock Fellowship Program. Today I'm an instructional coach, and right before here, I was at the high school that I also support teachers in East San Jose, where we were all gathering together to raise money for our first gen college students who are getting ready, one more semester to go before they start their college careers.
My name is Mary Hooser. I'm a doc student here at Stanford, and I also work at CSEC with Melissa and Angela and others in the room. And I'm also mostly responsible to the teachers that I work with through the Hollyhock Fellowship, and their students, and to my teammates on the program.
My name is Camille Puccetti, and I teach 9th grade English at Sacred Heart Prep in Appleton. My responsibility is to make sure that my minority students don't get lost in the huge group of white affluent students that we have on our campus.
My name is Monica Nagy. I also am at Sacred Heart Prep in Atherton. I teach 9th grade English and 10th grade US Lit, and then also work a lot with our first generation college bound kids and our Office of Equity, Justice, and Multicultural Education to support all of our students of color, all of our low-income students, historically underrepresented.
My name is Javier Hines. I work right here at CSET also, and my responsibility is, well, I have a lot of them here in the center, but it's basically to help support the supporters of teachers, and since that's something I really care about, the teaching profession, this is a place where I feel like I can have that impact.
I'm Elizabeth. I am a postdoc in Center to Support Excellence in Teaching. I'm working on the PSC project.
And what does that stand for?
Yeah, that stands for the problem solving cycle. So we're working to help develop teacher leaders with the San Francisco school districts to give professional development to the math teachers at their school.
Thanks. Welcome.
My name's Decker Walker. I'm retired from the faculty in the School of Education, and I'm toying with some ideas around teachers taking leadership in developing better practices.
Sure. Welcome. Thanks for everything you've done here. Hey.
Carrie Ballin, I'm the Director of Outreach here at the Center to Support Excellence in Teaching, and my responsibility is to make sure that all of the amazing educators out there in the world know about and are supported through CSET's research efforts to design and develop transformative professional development for educators.
CSET representing G. Thanks for coming through. Over here.
I'm Vinci Darrow, and I am the Director of Math Learning at UL Scale. My responsibility is to improve the experience of kids in school, particularly in math classes everywhere.
My name is Emma. My responsibility used to be to hang out with teenagers and help them know how awesome they were in classrooms. Sometimes just relationship to mathematics and lots of other things. And now I am a second-year PhD student here,
with responsibilities and stuff, which is really exciting, which is the Stanford Teacher Ed program, elementary math methods, equity in schooling course, teaching students with special needs. And my other responsibility is to ask questions about how students are negotiating identity and agency and power, particularly around race and language in their math learning spaces.
Well,
Hi, I'm Jeff Baker. I work with the New Teacher Center, and my responsibilities include supporting mentoring and instructional coaching programs that are sustainable and really grounded in action research. So my main responsibility is to uncover my own assumptions and perspectives and to be skeptical of them as a start, and then to move from there.
My name's Jen Menti. I also work for the New Teacher Center on a project in partnership with the Ravenswood School District. I work as a literacy coach and professional developer. So my responsibility there is to my teachers and the students in those classrooms, making sure that they're getting quality literacy instruction. And I would also say like a larger responsibility that I feel in the world of education is just really trying to drive a exploration for educators into their identities to help understand how they're creating spaces for their students to learn.
So most of you met me during the introductions. I'm Janet Carlson. I direct the Center to Support Excellence in Teaching, and I think my responsibility is to use Stanford's resources, which are deep and wide, particularly in human resources, for the betterment of learning for all kids.
There you go, well said. And thank you for all sharing that in really personal ways that are connected to the love of labor that you all are embarking in. A lot of this work here is motivated by a research framework called Love-Based Inquiry by Crystal Laura out of Chicago. And what I want to hear from you, because I'm sharing love with you, and that means we're in relation. And in order to do that, we have to communicate and understand a little bit about each other, and perhaps continue that trajectory outside of these walls here. So that said, some of you all are classroom teachers, some of you work with teachers, some of you are working with folks who work with teachers and so forth. But whatever you're doing, you're working for the betterment of young folks wherever they are in the process of learning content as well as learning oneself. And so as you engage in the conversation today, I'm trying to give you multiple points of entry where some of the work that I've been thinking about for a while, you can think about it as it might relate to you. And I want to throw this first word out here. It might sound a little controversial, but what are your own problems? As you think through everything, what are your own problems? What are your own problems? I want to challenge you to think about, yes, you do have problems. What are they? And so forth. And then what are those problems within the context of your current conditions? How do you operate, navigate within them? Maybe you coach teachers at a different school. What are their conditions? Maybe you're working with pre-service teachers. What are their conditions? And then how do you seek to create conditions? Conversely, how do you replicate what's already there? So forth. So think about those questions as we grapple through some of these ideas today. And I won't spend a lot of time on my story, but I wanted to highlight a couple of things. Once again, we're building relationships in this process here. And part of what's at my roots is just my commitment to young folks, but also teachers, the community, communities like mine where I work, which is mostly East Oakland, or Oakland area in general. And what does it mean to really push the way systems, institutions are working, and the way that we think about them, as well as ourselves within them for the long haul. And so, so I was having this conversation with some folks the other day about the Oakland Raiders as a communal healing tool. And there's a lot to heal from in the world, right? And And what's really exciting, and it's always been this way, regardless of how well the Oakland Raiders have been doing, and I've been a fan for a long time, is the way in which you're able to just commune with somebody that you haven't even met before. You just walk somewhere, you're wearing a Raiders something, they're wearing a Raiders something, and you're like, how about those Raiders? How about them, right? And so you engage in that kind of communal exchange there. Similarly, I'm an active martial artist, specifically in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And what I love about this, and why I bring it up, is it because it mirrors really closely the process of becoming a teacher. And not just being credentialed to become a teacher, but becoming a teacher over the long haul. Because arguably, we're always becoming a teacher, and so forth. So this has really evoked that process of what does it mean to learn, work through your own ego, work through your own problems, develop skills, develop competence and confidence towards applying it within a moving target. And then just as my family right here, this is my son who's 2 years old, is the epitome of the terrible twos. Whereas my daughter, who's 7 now, she was not that. We skipped right past the terrible twos. So the universe is getting us back with this little guy here. His name is Davao, and his name represents an area in the Philippines that resisted the Spaniards throughout the whole 500 years of colonization and occupation. My daughter's named Mayeli, and she's named after the Filipina moon goddess and protector of women. This is my wife, Pilar, and I like to think of her as a pillar in our family, someone who holds us all up. She's also a transitional kindergarten teacher at Oakland Unified. Also, as I work towards my offerings, what I branch out to do, the leaves, the flowers that I offer to the world, the universe, and so forth, I really think about what does it mean to transform self, what does it mean to transform society, but within a process that's about self-determination for our community and self-actualization of ourselves, and then just finding ways to be healthy and live in just society. It's centered around love here, and this is the school that I used to work at in the Fruitvale. So, that said, I want to talk about this idea of what's dangerous first. And so this will ground us in some ideas of this problem that I've been really thinking about, which I want to see what you're thinking about, how you're thinking about that. I don't know, this guy named Carter Woodson talked about this idea that we're on dangerous ground. That every book that the black boy reads tells him that he's inferior. 30 years later, James Baldwin talked about we're in dangerous times. And he was addressing teachers about we're in a society that seeks to destroy us. So what does it mean to be at war with this society? And if you are at war with the society and what it aims to do with particularly black and brown folks, then that's dangerous. Right? Be prepared for that fight. And this thing here is about the idea that Hollywood seeks to create a pathologized picture of our young folks and urban communities. And it says that we have dangerous minds that need to be tamed, that need to be harnessed, that need to be saved. And if we can just channel them, we can use them for good things and so forth. But I want to play on this idea that we need to confront the ways in which people see us as people who work in urban communities, ourselves as folks who are of color, and the things that trap what we do, our minds. Right? What are those things that trap ourselves and our minds and so forth? So this is part of the context that we're working under, and the reason why I bring up those ideas is because I want to drill down to what dangerous ground is, dangerous times are, and dangerous mind as it relates to schools. And in particular, as it relates to schools, I want to use school as an example of an institution, and that institutions are inherently ideological. There's a reason why it does what it does. There's a structure behind it, and it's intended to do that, and there are some things that it doesn't do, and there are reasons behind that as well. So I want to briefly just kind of talk through this idea here about what I mean by institutions are inherently ideological. So just imagine this circle here is representing institution, right? And so like this foundation, it has ideology that guides what it's going to do and how it's going to do that. And what it's going to do and how it's going to do that is mediated by structures. These are the things that you have to do, these are how you do it, and it controls the ways in which we interact with each other and so forth. As we interact with each other, within those structures, we produce a culture. This is our practices, this is where we talk to each other, where we interact, as well as all the informal things that we might do within that space. Those things then mediate situations and behaviors for individuals as well as groups of people to also act, not just interact. So individuals are also part of this whole thing. So when we think about this idea about where you work at and you're working with teachers, they're operating, as you already know, within this context. There's a whole lot of stuff that guides the way they do things and even what they think about. So I want to really talk about what are those things and how do we interrupt some of the things that might be more harmful to the young folks that they're working with, as well as what's harmful to their own trajectory as teachers, their own road. But I bring this up to start this out to ground us because Baldwin, because Woodson, they said this a long time ago. So arguably, they're warning us. And particularly right now, and whatever happens in January and the next 4 years, there's a whole lot of work that we're going to really need to do and be active participants in how do we navigate those, counter those, disrupt those, and so on. And how do we take that warning to be from the fire next time to be the fire now? Right? So we don't have to just accept the conditions that things are dangerous. We could also be a part of danger ourselves. And Gloria Ladson-Billings talked about this idea of dangerous work. And she said that when we create the conditions for particularly our teachers to teach in ways that disrupt social inequities, disrupt the way that schools have historically functioned, then that's dangerous work. Because the way schools function is that way for a purpose. And if you're interrupting that, it's seeking to take away from some other group of people who like it that way. And so what does it mean for us to engage with dangerous work? And so I want to let this teacher talk a little bit about that, and then I want us to talk about what does it mean to engage in dangerous work too. Take it back here.
But because we are able to build such strong community as a staff, we attempt to build strong community as a student community and as a larger school. Like, it makes people feel at home. It makes people feel comfortable. People are able to speak their mind, to ask opinions, to be curious, to take risks. You know, like why are things the way they are is a controversial question. And in a lot of traditional schools, that's not in the textbook, right? And so having to find alternative texts and things like that, like, is important at our school, right? Like, to look at non-traditional texts, to be able to read not only the word but the world, look at media, look at images, look at music, look at poems, look at other things that also speak truth and bring light to these issues that we constantly talk about, right?
I think about what is currently going on that is important and important in terms of, you know, what should kids know and study, what is appealing and interesting, what do kids care about at the time, but also important in terms of what can help students move closer to free, you know, whatever, you know, issues that can help students understand concepts that will help them make sense of their everyday experiences and, you know, what they live, that can help them move closer to freedom. Together with what kind of skills do they need to develop, and how do those skills overlap with content content standards and learning targets that we have set.
So my question for you is this. First, let's start out by, why are you here today? Why are you at this talk, and what have you been thinking about? And why do we need to talk about what's dangerous, particularly as it relates to our work? So turn to a partner next to you and engage in this question. Why are you here today, and what's dangerous about the work that you do, and why talk about it?
I feel like I've been pondering this question of, so we know each other very well. So next door, I want to talk about dangerous I don't know, it's kind of like I feel like I keep saying around. That I was people outside of it that like connect really well on that different thing, and so like in the March just so much that I feel like when I saw the better it makes me I can answer a little bit more why did access to power and treatment it's usually kind of I think there's teachers are just like I think it's trying to like having the interface to have and I think that's what it gives you dangerous work. Yeah, it's like safety is so it's interesting how you have the word oh, that's great.
Okay, about 2 more minutes.
I mean, in the first year, even though that was never about
Yes. There's tension.
Take the next 10 seconds to think about it. Start wrapping up your conversation. Partners for sharing, for listening. I'd love to hear from 2 or 3 folks. Why talk about what's dangerous?
What's the big deal with this? Why not just keep going? Why does work have to be dangerous in the first place? Why do this? What y'all talking about?
We talked about what's dangerous, not why talk about it.
Okay, what was dangerous?
But I think what's dangerous is trying to change a very well-established system. And in thinking, you may have a good research base, you might have good reasons, you might think this will serve all students better. But the system itself, without deliberately being so, holds on to the way it's always done things.
Right.
And it's really dangerous to try and disrupt that because people get threatened by change.
That's right. Thank you. Yeah, I saw another hand back there.
Well, we were just talking about how when you're in a classroom that's heterogeneous in terms of student backgrounds and student perspectives and student politics and things like that, what is effective in terms of like how important the relationships are in effectively meeting students where they are when they're in such different places. And so if you're talking about race is something that's dangerous, right? Like if you're talking about race, how do you meet students who are used to being silent all day, every day, versus those who have never been, like a white privileged man student who's never been silenced?
Right.
And how do you meet them both where they are and try to build community and do that in ways that are towards your goal?
Sure. Right. That's complex. Right? Yeah. And what does it look like now in 2017? Well, in some ways that there's permission to talk about race in the ways that we've been keeping closet for a while. I want to build from this idea of danger, of what's dangerous, and the ways in which we can approach our work as dangerous, with talking about some fundamental issues that I think you talked about. That's beneath these systems and the ways in which we interact with these systems. And that's around this idea of whatever. Raise your hand if you've heard the expression, it's whatever. Right? If you haven't heard of it, it's like, it is what it is. Right? Raise your hand if you said it is what it is today. I know sometimes I would still say, oh, it's whatever to my students. And they're like, no, it's not whatever. Ah, you got it. But this idea of whatever is something that needs to be problematized. And so I want to share a couple of things that I've collected through some of the work that I've done to help illustrate this idea of whatever, which I know you know about, but I re-invoke them always because sometimes our work, especially if we're working with adults, if we're working out here, is we get more insulated from the folks whose material conditions are much more dangerous than ours. So we get a little comfortable. So I would say that when we look at this, is it whatever, or is it now more than ever important to confront these in really complex ways? So take a look at this clip.
Police officers and a suspect are dead, and one officer is in grave condition following a pair of Saturday shootouts in Oakland, California.
From my house.
This is a notorious kill zone, man. Oakland, California, home to some of the most violent gangs in America.
Discovery Channel.
Here, almost 10,000 gang members rule with deadly force, recruiting young teens,
One in the head, I'll do it, 2, 3.
running drugs, selling guns, and murdering on a whim.
A protest is now planned in response to the New Year's Day deadly officer-involved shooting.
Take a look at this scene just 10 minutes ago. Officers ordered several people to the ground outside this store and appeared ready to make arrests. The chaos began around 6:30 tonight. A dumpster was set on fire and protesters rocked a police car.
It doesn't matter what
About
protest
10
this
minutes
was,
later,
it
we
could be
saw
any
a bunch of
protest
officers
in
running
a
after
year.
a person on a
This was
bicycle.
happening
They
during
were
Oscar
in a
Grant's
car engulfed in flames. It's one of at least 2 cars set on fire tonight.
I'm used to it. I'm used to seeing police. I mean, I know it's a little, how you say that? Cliche. Yeah, people say they're used to it, but it's true. People are used to it. You know, no one expects them to feel sorry for them, but that's just how it is.
Under unseen hand, hold trouble, theorize your games, difficult to
We're doing Infirmary Park. Infirmary Park, you know the significance of Infirmary? That's right. It's nicknamed Little Bobby Hutton Park. It's a place where the Black Panthers did a lot of organizing for free community and so forth. That sign about no killing any time, that's in Infirmary Park. It's literally a real sign that's there. And I start with this, it's from my context in Oakland. Not to contribute to the tropes of the urban or to what Tuck and Wayne Yang call narratives of pain when they talk about what's wrong with urban community. I do this to get, one, to recognize that there are aspects of this that are real, but two, these are messages that are pervasive, that we're bombarded with, that tell us how our lives are who live here and so forth. So these messages help to reproduce the ways in which we engage with our own worlds, as well as the way in which we identify with it and so forth. And so when young people look at these types of things sometimes, they say, it's whatever. Right? Yeah, I got jumped the other day, it's whatever. We got robbed, it's whatever. That teacher never listens to me, it's whatever. Right? I don't do good in school anyway, right? I'm not good at math anyway, right? It's whatever, and so forth. But now more than ever, it's how do we confront the idea it's whatever. What does that process look like? How do we confront that? I want to drill down. I always want to start backwards from young folks and what their conditions might be, at least how they're told that their conditions might be. And I want to go into the idea of teacher development. When you think of teacher development, think about it's whatever, teacher development, what kind of things come to mind? What do they say about PD? What do teachers think about? You've all been teachers.
Show up.
Show up.
Useless.
Useless.
Boring.
Who's been in large comprehensive schools where they've had PD? Where are they held at? Or are they held? In the gym? The auditorium? Cafeteria? Right? How often? 3 times a year, and it's called PD, these types of things. Right? It's not like that in open unified, at least for a large amount of the large schools that are there. So let's take a look at what some teachers might say about teacher development here.
When I was in LAUSD, professional development wasn't really professional development. It was a lot of like logistical stuff. It was a lot of like, we need to cover our ass kind of stuff. It was, here's, you know, a handbook on policies, you know, here's our dress code policy, here's, you know, the fight policy, here's, you know, sexual harassment policy, here's a policy for this, and that was called professional development. We have it only once a year for 2, maybe 3 days before the school year started, and we'd be all day sitting in, you know, big, you know, cafeteria, multi-purpose room with, you know, all 120, 130 teachers, listening to someone go page by page through a manual, and they call that professional development. And then, you know, to be more interactive, we got to walk around and look at test scores, and look at like the API score, and talk about how low they were and how many students we had who were far below basic, and how we as teachers needed to fix that without ever being provided with instruction on what can we do to address, you know, the skill gaps and that kind of thing.
Everyone uses that book, you know, that was like the main book that they went by, and it's like, you know, teaching you.
Teach like a champion?
Yeah, you know, things like, this slant position, you know, like, you trap the speaker, you know, it's just like things like that. But like, if I was to do this to, you know, my youth in Oakland, that's not cool, you know. So like the urban communities, like when we would go to, who teach in urban communities, when we would go to these trainings, it was like a joke for us, you know, because we did not find it useful, and the trainers who were training us, they were never teachers, you know? They just got their BA, they did this fellowship, and they just got promoted, you know? And it was like, come on, like I'm not gonna listen to you, you know, if you have no expertise, you have no training, you cannot give me any real examples, you know, when it comes to like teaching in the classroom. You know, like they did a fellowship, you know, but that was like extended day. But still, that's not enough training for me to believe you, you know, what you're teaching me. And it's all white women, like really young white women, besides this black woman, you know, who they have, like, you know, who they always make her do like all the cultural competency stuff, you know. And even that, it was really problematic because we only spent like an hour on that session, you know. So yeah, that was citizen school.
In my student teaching position, my mentor teacher would always write a note that was like, whatever you do, don't come to the auditorium. I do not want to see you down there. I do not want to see you walking by. Stay in the room. He was just like, get out. Because they were a giant waste of time. I was student teaching at a school that was a district school, but it had been taken over by some like educational administrative corporation. And they led really terrible PDs. And I was like, do you know what a graphic organizer is? Here are some examples of graphic organizers at other schools I've been at. It's like day to day. Teachers say messed up things about students, around students all the time, you know. And also when I was student teaching, my mentor teacher was like, Helen, at your school that you work at one day, you should just find that one person that is like pretty all right, the life, that's what he called it, and just stick with them.
I want us to talk about why is it important to explore this idea of it's whatever. After I share the teacher transcript, a conversation with a teacher, check out this real quick, and then I want to talk about what's whatever in schools and why is it important to engage in this idea of whatever. Check out this transcript.
The second language learners we have here, all the immigrants, the different cultures, the heritages, the homes that we come from, white middle-class Americans, are so different from some of the homes that these students come from. It's unbelievable. No wonder they can't get their homework done. They can't read, they can't write, they can't think. There's no support behind them. It's very frustrating to all of us teachers, and it's particularly frustrating when the finger's pointed to us, because we can't do everything, and it goes right back to the parents and the students that we're dealing with, not the teaching. I am thrilled with what my students can accomplish, but I'm also savvy enough to know that college isn't for all my students, and certainly not the university level. And it almost is putting down who they are and their culture and their heritage by insisting they need to go to college, when we should be thrilled at how much they have accomplished by getting through any years of high school. And so when you talk about the university and then you talk about my students in the same sentence, it really bothers me that it's like, well, they're not going to be successful unless they go to UC Merced. That is so irrelevant and so not part of their lives that it just really almost angers me, because we need to build on the successes that they have, not why aren't they university bound.
So let's talk about this. Why is it important to confront these ideas that folks might have about the way things are? Right? Why do we need to engage in that question around whatever? So go ahead and talk to a neighbor, perhaps with someone that you haven't talked to before. And why is it important to examine whatever? Let's take 4 minutes for that.
This is whatever. The stance like I know wow, I know it's right. The investment, what the investment is.
Take some things for granted because that's the only way
The background is sort of
yeah, whatever. It's the way it is. Take out the pictures and say, that's the next step. Well, whatever.
That would be why we have to that's just the way it is, right? There is no
well, they brought it back.
I think that was the question.
Think about 2 more minutes.
They think the word is like, this is not what I Right. University education is like the organization and that it's providing some real life but foundation starts so like they can't read, they can't write, they can't think. It's just like the most powerful language you undermine any sense of actually whenever we think about because it's
Think about if you want to share something you talked about. I apologize first. Your partners for sharing and listening. And let's go ahead and reset ourselves and come back together. I'd love to hear from 2 folks. What do you all talk about?
Do I do this thinking every day?
Why examine whatever?
I'm like, how do I not?
Came up. Why examine whatever? Because you could easily say, oh, the teacher don't get it. And that's it. I'm just going to stay away from this teacher. I'm going to do my thing. The teacher's going to do that. Or you could be, yeah, right? Me too, right? And it is really whatever. I'm going to do the best I can here. Is all I can do. Right? Easily do that. That's the super easy thing to do. But when we confront those assumptions that are underneath it, that we accept as normal, what does that get us? Why even embark on that? Came up with you all.
So for us, there's sort of two things. One is a question, which is just, you've gone through and identified an example of whatever. but I think there's a little bit of an issue of like, how do we even identify or help? Like, I don't think this teacher would look at what she said and say that this is quote unquote whatever. So like identifying it in the first place is an interesting exercise. Then the second thing that came up for us as to like why do we examine it is because my partner and I both had different reactions to like how we might tackle helping this teacher to sort of transform her mindset or her way of viewing the situation. So I think, yeah, I mean, you examine it because you want to try to find the right solutions that really help, I don't know, shed some light on solutions.
Is that easy? Hard?
It's hard. Because in one breath we're like, oh, well, in some ways you just want to wait for these teachers to kind of retire. But then you think, wait, like, how much of our teaching force right now are these teachers? Do we invest resources in trying to like transform educators like this?
And I don't think they're all veteran teachers. I think there's brand new teachers with the same.
Totally.
And where is the space in the education system to stop and take a look at your language or what you think, like, or to have someone get you to think a little bit deeper about what you think. Like, there's no space for that right now in many schools to do that work.
I also think it's scary to interrupt people's deficit mindset about kids. Like you're at the copy machine and someone says something like shorter than this, but says something. And, you know, do you do it right then when you're trying to get to your class and you're like, crap, I have to see this person in the department meeting later? Like it's scary to disrupt it. And yet if you don't disrupt it, it becomes a narrative of the adult culture in the school, which then impedes the ability to teach all kids in meaningful ways.
That's right. And then these conversations are normal. Right? This is like the stereotypical teacher lounge combo or lunchroom combo. Speaking of which, there's this web series called Teacher Lounge. You should look it up, Teacher Lounge. It's kind of funny. So you should check it out. There's some really interesting things. You should look up the one that talks about this guy who made his old wine. Yeah. I'll leave it at that. You can say something.
Well, you use the word scary, and I think that it brings up sort of like what is dangerous. So over the summer, I was teaching a course in STEP called Equity in Schooling, and we really sort of pull out like what is this deprivationist mindset, what is the culture of poverty narrative, and like supporting our own teacher candidates in starting to recognize it and notice it. But the next layer is I have a teacher candidate in their summer school placement who comes to me and says, my collaborating teacher said this today. What do I do? Right? And like, when is disrupting this narrative actually dangerous? Because if I want that teacher candidate with this different and distinct mindset to get to a classroom, to have access to students one day, like maybe, especially depending who they are and the optics of how they present, maybe they can't disrupt it right now because that is dangerous for them. Because they might not get to the classroom if like the when and the where and the how. I mean, I was almost lost my ability to be a teacher because I told my administrator that what she was doing with our special ed population was illegal, and I was truly like driven out of, like the school, like the New York State Department of Education. I almost could never teach in the Department of Ed again because it's threatening, because it's dangerous when you speak truth to power, right? Like, and I mean, I also think about like, when is my participation scary and someone else's would be dangerous? And what does that mean about me doing the thing that's scary because for me it's scary and for someone else it's dangerous, and therefore like, I need to do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I want to tease out this idea of what does it mean to leave a context where that's the norm, to get driven out of a context where that's the norm, and what does that mean for us as we try to move from that. But yeah.
I was just gonna build on that idea that like, there's the for whom is it dangerous and for whom is it scary, and how do you, where are you situated in those conversations, but then also
the importance again of, because you bring up the point of sort of responsibility to a community, whether that's, whatever that means, to an educational community, right? Or to students or whatever. And how important the ability to have relationships is and build relationships even when you feel deeply in disagreement or disconnected from or in such a different place from the people that you have to have those conversations with at times to move them and change the systems and change the institutions.
Yeah.
And what that requires and how do we get better at figuring out what that looks like for each individual. It's a very individualized process, I think.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. What is the role of relationships in this whole process? Well, let me share a little bit about that. One of the questions that I was living with this research here, and again, it's for one high school, one context that I've been really thinking about what does this mean broader scale. But it's basically how does the culture and structure of a school that proclaims its commitment to social justice work to achieve this mission of developing its teachers to become humanizing, critically conscious, intellectually engaged, and reflective practitioners. So these four things are what the school is trying to do as it relates to. This is what we mean by developing teachers. And so how does it do that through the culture and the structure with novice teachers as well as teacher leaders who are also novice as well, not like experienced teacher leaders. So this is what was guiding me, and this continues to guide me now, and it allows me to live these questions. And so I want to talk about this idea now about what's woke, and I'm gonna talk about this from unpacking a couple of different ideas that I'll talk about briefly, and then we'll engage in trying to see what these ideas might look like in application by looking at some interviews with some teachers. All right. So first, these folks here talked about this idea of political clarity. And this idea of political clarity is basically that a teacher or a person has the clarity to be able to, what they do, their purpose, their actions are grounded in the political aspirations of the folks whom they work with as well as themselves. They're clear with what they do and why they do that, and it's rooted in some type of political endeavor. I'll play with this idea, but it almost sounds like this, you're either politically clear or you're not politically clear. So I found that to kind of sound dichotomous. So I've been talking about this idea of political perspectives that talks more about this continuum that works towards this idealized notion of political clarity. The way in which I talk about political perspectives is written here, but essentially it's an evolving ethic of care and love that's built around a personal philosophy. Like you have to know what you believe in, you have to know what you value. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't evolve over time, but you have to start thinking about what that means, whether you're a pre-service teacher, whether you're a teacher in the classroom, whether you're a school leader, instructional coach, and so forth. And what does that mean in terms of your own evolving critical consciousness and sense of urgency in the world, your purpose, responsibility, and how that relates to breaking the cycle of subordination in schools. And I think that this process here occurs with these four simple ideas, which are really hard to do. But I like to keep things simple and then let you all figure out why that's so hard though. But I think political perspectives happens, the development of that, whether I was a first-year teacher, whether I was a 10-year teacher, whether I was a school principal, and even now, is as I gain more experience, I start to have deeper insights into what I meant to do, what I was thinking, how does this apply in this context. And as I relate that experience to critical knowledge that I'm gaining, that helps me name the experiences that I've had, that helps me understand the things that I went through, and that helps me also to engage in what do I do about my future. But also, when I start to talk about it, when I make sense of these ideas, what I did, what someone else does, when I'm in conversation with someone else, that process also helps to reconcile some of these things here. But I can't do this without also being in self-reflection with myself, reflection of the context that I'm in, and being able to do that authentically really being able to have assumptions checked, and really able to then start to go this cycle again. Now let me get some more experiences. Now let me see what that means now. Because this process here, although it looks really linear, I think it's recursive, and it's not necessarily like you go here, 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 and here. I think you go all over the place with these things here. Right? But I think these four things, the way in which I'm conceiving political perspectives, helps to cultivate that. And I think this idea of a teacher developing political perspectives is a piece of this thing that I'm calling school cohesion. And what I mean by school cohesion, this is where an entire school community is aligned by purpose-driven, principle, value-centered philosophies. And folks know about not just what they're doing and how they're doing it, but why they do that. And why this thing is related to meeting our values, meeting our purpose, and so forth. It's already stated. And people are able to get feedback. There's a culture where they can know how they're doing with things, and it doesn't have to happen through institutionalized ways where, like, if you're having an observation, here's some feedback. No, it's informal, right? Like, you get to be at the copy machine and say, like, hey, I was in your classroom the other day and I noticed this type of thing. And folks get comfortable with being able to engage in difficult conversations because it's normal in that context. Structure helps mediate that. And culture reifies that, reproduces that. And while I talk about that really simply, like that thing and that thing right now, like what happens here? Like, yeah, it's easy to talk about you gotta get experience, you gotta learn some things here, you talk to each other, and then you reflect about that, but is that easy? That's the hard part, right? This is the part that we're trying to figure out here, is what do you actually talk about? What is it rooted in? And how do you engage whoever you're talking with, including yourself, to critically reflect, right? And I think there are some things that help me at least make sense out of the teachers that I was working with at the school side where I did this research, but also it's helped me coach school leaders, helped me coach teachers, and engage in these conversations that are based off of relationships over time, right? And so how do we get from like individuals to be able to think about what they're doing, to having conversations, to also really think about like what does it mean to be a community, to be engaged in these types of critical dialogue and critical reflections. I just want to offer these 3 resources here. You can write them down and all that, and then but I won't spend too much time talking about like what these folks meant by these.
Can you help my ignorance and translate the word woke?
Yeah, I will. But I'm going to save it. Because I'm building the case, and then I'm going to say,
I mean, you
that's
have a
woke.
school at the bottom, and you're saying the hard part is the interaction with the individual. But the hard part to me is to create that school.
Yeah, that is.
Right?
That is hard.
Most schools do not have what you expressed down there.
No, and I'm going to ask that question in a little bit too, right? But I want to talk to you about like what I've learned from a site where folks are trying to do that.
That was the case.
Yeah, and then I'm going to pose that question too, like, well, not other schools like that.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Like that's not there. But what is it about that place that we can learn from to maybe explore other places and so forth?
But there are schools that think they're doing that too.
That's true too.
But they don't have the relationships to help.
Right, absolutely, right? And so these 3 ideas here is when you say stuff, like how do you target that word choice, that group of words, that idea here, that's reflective of a particular ideology. So this dude here from UCLA talked about this concept called ideology in pieces, and it's helped me with really thinking about ideology that's in discourse practices. These folks here from Harvard, I think both these folks are from Harvard, they talked about this idea of immunity to change, and that we have this perfect system within us that says that despite our goals and our aspirations of what we want to do, there are some hidden assumptions inside of us that interrupt that. There are some things that interfere with our efforts in trying to achieve those goals. And how do we uncover that? This thing here, this really interesting idea of self-deception, is this the idea is when we try to inflate our own self. And in that process of inflating our own self and maybe protecting ourselves and the work that we're doing,
We deflate others, we point the finger at others, we pathologize others. But where are we? We have no problem. It's them who have the problem, and so forth. And so these ideas here all expose hidden things that might happen, not just within a conversation, but also within yourself and then within someone else. I would invite you to just look into these things here. They might offer a resource to engage in these really difficult conversations. What I want to talk about then is when you have this as a practice, I found 5 principles to this idea of getting woke. Right? And I'm gonna not talk about this from an institutional systemic perspective. I'm gonna talk about this these are 5 things that I noticed folks doing in this place here, which I have also noticed folks doing in other places as well. And in terms of getting woke is being aware. Getting woke is understanding what you see, what is, and what do you do about that? How do you act against those types of things here? And I've noticed that when educators are anchored within beliefs of an institution, whether that's a school, whether that's a teacher group, whether that's a nonprofit, and those beliefs are explicit, they're principled, value-centered, and purpose-driven, that becomes an anchor for their conversations. That becomes an anchor for what they do. That becomes an anchor to guide what they do and what they don't do and so forth. And they use that as as how we do it here. And it's important to us. Like, we don't talk about kids that way and so forth. So this becomes an anchor in that process of getting woke because it helps influence other people who are in an emerging process. What I've also noticed is that educators will examine themselves by themselves because they've started to get some tools to be able to do that, some frameworks to be able to do that. They self-reflect, but they can also do it with others. They engage in this conversation where it's normal, and it helps in the process of getting woke for them. This is a big thing, and I'll give some examples from teachers about this right here. This is about educators problematizing structures, situations, and behaviors instead of pathologizing individuals. Basically, how do you problematize instead of pathologize? Educators are made aware of, confront their hidden assumptions and their contradictions. And I would say, like, those 3 resources I shared earlier, it helps you do some of these things here. So these principles here can be mediated by some of those resources that I shared. Sorry. The last one was they critically reflect on the political realities of themselves, the community, and their students. I'm going to give examples of a couple of these things here, and then we'll talk about it, but just a quick time check.
Well, we started a little bit late, but you should probably wrap up within 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to share, let's see here, an example of I'm going to share this example. I was a teacher here. All right, this is about teachers are made aware of and confront their hidden assumptions and contradictions. This is a brief excerpt of a conversation I had with him in the beginning of the school year about why this context, why this school, why did you come here? He's a new teacher. So what he said.
I wanted to be in a community where people would push me in the directions and in the ways that I couldn't push myself. There's not very many schools where I could be working with predominantly people of color. There's not very many schools where I could be working with almost exclusively students of color. And that's just an area that I don't have that much experience in. I don't have that much knowledge about it. So I want to know about that.
Really quick impressions. What's going on with what this guy's saying here?
Sounds like a learner.
Yeah, he wants to learn. What's problematic about how he's trying to learn?
He's trying to learn from people of color, like everything that he needs to learn about people of color.
Passive approach.
Yeah, it's a passive approach. Like, teach me once again, right? Like, teach me once again.
and so forth. So take a look at this reflection after pushing him throughout the school year, his school leaders pushing him and thinking about some things. And even that idea that why he came there, let's see what he's thought about by the end of the year.
I think I've had to learn a lot about myself to be in this space. Like just understanding my own privilege, just understanding that there are probably microaggressions that I make in class that I cannot perceive, and that I need to work through. And why did I act that way? What does that mean? Why am I still feeling this way? Or also the positive thing, like, wow, like I was actually able to talk about that. I didn't know that I would be able to talk about that. I've never had somebody here say, no, you're wrong. That seems like a small thing, but like, it's like, people ask, why do you think that? Which is just way different than like, man, Mac, you just messed up the entire school culture. Like, how could you possibly do that?
Why do you think that? Right? It's important. It's a tool that you could use time and time again. Is why do you think that? Where does that come from? Uncover that hidden assumption. Problematize that. Right? And so, a couple of the other examples that I won't share is about a school leader who had self-proclaimed social justice educator. But sometimes those of us in self-proclaimed social justice educators, what we do is we judge the hell out of others who are not like us, right? It becomes the Person Olympics, it becomes who's more down, all this kind of stuff. And so what does it mean to push them too? Right? Because you can't claim to be a school that humanizes others if you yourself don't humanize others who are emerging in their process, right? And so, so there's some other things like that. And so, that said, I just want to just start this idea of talking about conditions a little bit more, talk about a possible way to think about this in terms of like an institutional context, not necessarily as an individual context, so that you can kind of wrap your head around person, but also institutions as well. And then I'll post some questions for you to think about as you walk out of here. But when I think about conditions, I think about a couple of things. Essentially, the intersection of culture and structure that's rooted in a purpose-driven, principle, values-centered philosophy. When you have this, you design cohesive architecture that's aligned with these things here. So your scope and sequence, your teacher development, to your staff norms, all that kind of stuff can be designed around this. And what does that mean to be value-centered? So that the practices that you engage in, cultural practices, become normal, right? A different kind of normal, and so forth. And this idea here, what looks like a mess, and it is a mess, the only thing I want to say about this is I like circles, so if you think about this circle as the institution here, right? It has a particular values-directed purpose that determines why it's doing what it's doing. You have individuals that are in there who interact with structures and culture of the institution, and those individuals have these experiences with others and with themselves, and they react and so forth. If this is robust enough, this container here, and the culture and the structure is aligned to these values here, I think it can help folks maintain this sense of cohesion and become on this path towards emerging as a much more critically conscious, humanizing, intellectually engaged, reflective practitioner, and so forth. So what does it mean for an institution to guide the way you do things and to help in your process of becoming a teacher who is much more centered on what does it mean to be dangerous and so forth? You know this hierarchy of needs from Maslow. I think also there's a hierarchy of how institutions can do things. And a lot of times institutions really focus on what do we do, what do we do, what do we do, and perhaps some behind you knows. I like to say like why do you do that first? Let's start with why. And then start thinking about the overarching framework for how. And then really start thinking about the stuff that a lot of schools, teacher, coaches, other institutions that work with teacher development institutions do. But root it in this. And then what are the cultural values, purposes, ongoing relationship building that supports this in the long haul. But this thing here is, I would say, like, definitely don't underestimate the purpose, the value of what this does. And so, as we walk out of here, and maybe we can entertain a couple of questions, but just think about the role of leadership versus admin. What does it mean to be a school leader, instructional leader, versus an admin? As a principal, myself, I would work and aspire towards always being a school leader. And we had a culture at our school where we didn't even use the word admin unless it was deserved. And ultimately, I noticed when I left the school, people started using admin again. And I thought that was really interesting. So what is the role of leadership, though? And then what happens when you're not in that school? What happens in schools where they have these rigid structures in that culture? What's your role of relationship? What are the role of that spaces? The spaces that mediate ideology, the spaces that mediate the conversations around ideology, that mediates immunity to change, and that mediates self-deception. Think about all of those as you walk out of here, and then please remember this. This guy, Paulo Freire, said this in Pedagogy of Indignation, especially next year, next 4 years. I have the right to love and express my love for the world, to hold it as my motivation to fight, just as I have the right to be angry and express that anger, to hold it as my motivation to fight. Because while being a historical being, I live history as a time of possibility, not predetermination, not it's whatever. The time is now, the fire is this time. Let's go. Let's get woke.
Thank you. I invite you to converse informally, enjoy some more refreshments, and think about how to do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.